If I can get a call to order, and we'll move on to pledge allegiance after.
All right, Councilmember McCabe? Present. Councilmember Aguilar?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra?
Present.
Mayor Soria?
Present.
For the record, Councilmember Sikairos is currently not in attendance, but he is expected within the next few minutes.
And if we could stand for pledge of allegiance. Any changes to the agenda, Council? I don't see any, so we'll go ahead and move on to announcements and reports. We'll start off with Supervisor Rodrigo Espinosa.
Thank you, that was fast. Good evening. The Vice Mayor doesn't want me to say anything. About my personal life or, the public? No, I'm just, I'm just kidding. I don't know, is it Facebook, the public, or personal? I know, huh? I said how the thing was today. We had a council, a meeting today, but anyway, so you made me forget what I was going to say. Now I don't have nothing to say like you wanted. Well, we had an NCAG meeting on Thursday, and Alex, he's Mr. Vice Chair right here. It's going to be in Angostin, so hopefully we'll see you there, and if anybody wants to give us a ride over there together, we'll ride together. But now, I lost my train of thought. So for now, I always criticize you. I'm just happy that Panda Express is open. I tried it out yesterday, and the managers were very nice, and I guess the town's happy and creating more revenue for our community, and we're still trying to fix the bottleneck. I know that Merced got its. They're putting that sidewalk back way from Atwater to Merced, and Los Banos is getting its sidewalk over there too. So it's public safety. So we're trying to get our hopefully our CMAQ or any money that we can get to fix our. Because I was approached by another lady that she said, "When are you guys going to fix that?" Well, we've been trying to fix it for 10 years, and I know everybody brings it up. So, but as soon as we have more stuff, I'll come back up. So thank you. Any questions?
I do, and there's a little confusion about the community participation project that you and Supervisor.
Oh, the participatory
project. Can you explain just for our benefit what that is? And
well, it's just projects. They could have canceled, I guess, the discretionary money that I got July 1st. So I came in January 3rd, and they had the votes to cancel it, never brought it up to council it. And now that, in July, after July, we started a participatory budget that I was approached by the California government and BHC about, that the process that throughout the United States that they engage the citizens to spend this participatory budgeting. It's been done in Boston and in states across the country, and you engage the citizens to use that money, but in our situation, it's $40,000 for the next, this year and next year, my $80,000 for next year. That's what it's going to be for my district, and Lilo was going to do the same thing. So that would be $160,000. We keep both our districts engaged in this process, and then we just have picked a committee to start, looking into getting the projects from the community. And lo and behold, we approved the budget, and I guess it was kind of my fault. I didn't go for it right away, and I was trying to trying to do some other stuff, but in the end, they pulled the discretionary money, and now this project is no longer viable unless it comes back, and I doubt it will come back. I know that I got criticized for not approving it, but I said, what? How can I vote for getting rid of the discretionary money when I did say it was a slush fund, and I would be aware with it, but we could have done that when, all throughout the first 6 months during the year when I had nobody engaged and, I had not participated, I didn't get the citizens all, engaged into this process, and now I do, and now you guys take it from under them, and that's not right. This is the citizens trying to spend the money the way it's supposed to be, the right way spent throughout the county, and now I don't have it, and so I think the citizens were upset.
Well, maybe something can be worked out when they're not, maybe, in the future in the county budget to where maybe it comes under a different fund to work with local communities. Maybe something like that can be worked out down the road,
Yeah, I didn't have any, I'm the only supervisor, didn't have any money. I think I had like $90 left, and Lilo has over $100,000. She can probably go through that process still with her district, but I'm not able to. And the rest of the supervisors, they've been spending money the last few weeks, the last few times on the agenda, they've been spending money like nothing, and now, of course, now they're not going to spend it, but they didn't want to do away with all that they had accumulated over the years. I said, well, if you want to take it out, including what you've accumulated in the past. But they didn't want to do that, but they just wanted to take away what I had this year. So, but anyway, I just feel bad for for the public and the citizens that were engaged in the middle of this process, because BHC has spent a lot of money too. The California Endowment, the parent company, has spent a lot of money with meetings, and they bring food, they pay members that were assisting us to be engaged in this process, and now it's all down the drain. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the public? Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. I see the CAL FIRE up, or are you up next, Chief?
Just a quick.
Okay. Yeah, Chief of Police?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Just 2 items real quick for the benefit of our community, and it's on Facebook also. October 4th, we have Cone the Cop from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at McDonald's, and we'll be partnering with McDonald's to serve ice cream cones to the community. So come out and have some ice cream with the cops. Secondly, October 28th, it's a Saturday, we're going to have our next National Drug Take-Back Day. So anybody that's got any expired or unwanted prescription drugs, they can drop it off at the police department between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. We'll collect it, free service, and we'll provide that to the Department of Justice, and they dispose of it properly. And again, that's also being on Facebook, so thank you.
Hey, Chief, I have a question that is for the citizen. What if they have some other than that day? Where do they take it to now? Is it Merced County, or?
There's some places, I'm not sure where in the county you can deliver. I know for sure you can actually, unfortunately, it's in Turlock. They have a bin in their lobby that they collect every day if they need to. But I'm not sure about the Merced County, where they might have it.
Okay, all right, thanks, Chief.
Mr. Mayor, I believe Public Health Department collects that too.
Public Health, okay. Thank you, Councilmember.
I got some calls that that ICE was in town last week. Is there any truth to that at all? It was some citizen calls I received last week.
Not that I'm aware of. If they're here for an event, I'll be given a heads up, and I usually will let the city manager know, but I have not heard of that the last week, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, citizens of Livingston. Chief Carter with Livingston Fire Department Monthly Summary. So for the last month, it's been a while since we've been here due to fire activity and scheduling conflicts. But during the last month, we've been fairly active here at Livingston Fire Department. We've ran a total of 76 medical aids within the city, 0 vegetation fires, 9 vehicle accidents, 1 vehicle fire, 1 structure fire, 6 alarm soundings, 1 false alarm, 1 firefighter standby, 7 public assists, and 2 hazardous material / carbon monoxide releases calls. We're getting to the point where a lot of the residents are starting to, on the cooler nights, they're starting to turn on whether it be their fireplaces or their heaters. And their carbon monoxide detectors are starting to pick up those gases there. So we're going to start encouraging the community to make sure that they're, one, changing out the batteries, that the house is well ventilated when they're turning on their fireplaces, or starting their fireplaces up, and then ensuring that they go through and clean out their air ducts before they turn on their heaters for this winter season coming up. In the county, in the county, we ran a total of 8 medical aids, 7 vegetation fires, 16 vehicle accidents, 1 vehicle fire, 9 structure fires, 3 debris fires, 3 alarm soundings, 3 public assists, and those are the calls in the county area surrounding Livingston, for a total for this year, we're at 1,155 calls for the year. 641 of those calls within the city, 514 are within the county areas. We've had a 69% PCF coverage, PCF response to the incidents, with a 12% PCF coverage. 78% of those calls are definitely within Livingston's response area, our initial response area in the city and the county areas. This last month's training, we trained on, the paid personnel trained on master streams and appliances. So anytime we get any large incidents, what we do is we tend to go through, we'll hydrant hookups, we'll flow our deck guns, our portable monitors, and that helps us get a lot of water flow to any big incidents, big fires. Our volunteers worked on forcible entry and hydrants, just going around the city, working on being able to force doors open, or vehicle doors, or structure doors, as well as going through checking some of the hydrants here locally in the city. The fire prevention reminder that we want to give this month is, so the county still provides free fire detectors, smoke detectors to residents within the county areas and the city. To receive a free smoke detector, we encourage the residents to go down come down to the station with a picture ID and then fill out a quick form. We'll give them a free smoke detector. Installation is not provided with that, but we want to ensure that the community understands that smoke detectors have a lifespan of 10 years. So anything that's beyond the 10-year date needs to be swapped out, and we can do that free for them. Some of the things that we were involved with this month, we went down to Foster Farms, their Health and Safety Day. We attended we did some reminders as far as escape plans, ensuring that the community and the residents have fire escape plans in case of fire within their homes. We went over smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and mitigation factors. We also talked about the proper use of fire extinguishers, as well as smoke detectors. We handed out a few there to some of the residents in the community. Now the football season is in full swing. We're out there every night with definitely rooting on the local high school. And we'll have our squad will be on standby for any medical emergency that needs to take place. And one of the things that we're looking at doing also is our squad that we have currently is pretty much obsolete. The concern with the squad now is anytime that we're responding to pieces of apparatus that cannot fully support or respond in the full capacity of whether it be a structure fire or vehicle fire, because it doesn't hold a tank on it. So we're looking at replacing it and moving it out, taking it out of service. One of the reasons we're looking at taking it out of service is trying to get something that's a little more versatile for the city use, and that will allow the volunteers to respond here locally as well as in the county areas. One of the things that we're looking at going to is a Type 6 engine. Some of the advantages to the Type 6 is it carries water, has foam application. We can respond to medical aids. We can respond to vehicle accidents. It's a smaller type of apparatus that can maneuver through the city and down some of the alleyways. Instead of taking our big engine off-road during vegetation fires, we can take this small, versatile engine, off of roadways. It'll save a lot of damage to our big apparatus. And then the other thing that it does, it's reliable. It will in some capacity generate some revenue for the city if it goes out for a mutual aid response to fires throughout the state. But it's a safer working platform, and when we say a safer working platform, because it doesn't require any special licensing other than our Code 3 driving, which most of our volunteer driver operators receive, and just a normal Class C driver license. So with our engines that we currently have, it takes a commercial B license in order to become a driver operator to respond that. With our Type 6 engine, we don't need any special licensing other than a Class C and then the training that we do in-house for our Code 3 response. So we'll be able to get more response, and it'll open up our number of driver operators here locally that can respond to this type of apparatus.
Are those four-wheel drive?
Yes, sir, four-wheel drive.
Chief, what's the approximate cost for one of those?
So they'll range anywhere between, we go used about 90,000 up to new anywhere to 160,000. A new engine will cost us roughly $350,000 to $370,000, and that's for a new engine like we have currently. But the issue with the engine, like I said before, they're larger, they're bigger, which means that they're limited to where they can go. With these Type 6 engines, we can pretty much do anything that we can do with our big engine. The only difference is the amount of water that it carries. The Type 6s will carry anywhere from 300 to 400 gallons. Our larger engines carry 750 gallons. Right? So obviously we wouldn't be responding this to a structure fire, but if we're out on a vegetation fire and we're coming back to the station and we get diverted to a structure fire in the city, we can at least respond it initially and then have the engine follow up behind. So we'll have multiple resources at scene for a quicker response. Okay? Any questions? Okay. One other thing I wanted to touch on, so Captain David Sherrick, a few months ago, transferred to training, our training bureau. So he's now overseeing the training for the county of Merced, for the entire Merced County and the city of Livingston. So in his replacement, we've had Captain Brian Alvis here locally, here at the station. He's been here for a few months, and I wanted to give him a moment to formally introduce him to the council. So I'd like to introduce Captain Brian Alvis.
Good evening. So a little bit about myself with my career and stuff. I actually went to Livingston High School, graduated in 2000. So I've started as a volunteer in Delhi, so I'm local, live in Turlock, so I'm close by. Just makes it nice if I need to come in and help out the community or something. Did a volunteer for over 10 years. I did a season with CAL FIRE in MMU here. Did some time in Monterey and Santa Cruz counties, and now I'm back here. And I'm glad to be close to home, and I like what I see in this community. And Chief Carter has brought me up to speed on a lot of things that's going on, and I'd like to thank the council for some of the input that you guys have had toward the fire department, and we greatly appreciate it. If you guys have any questions for me.
Welcome back, Captain.
Well, thank you very much.
Welcome, Captain.
Hey, Captain, does that mean you're going to be making pancakes at the fire department now? On the, you have any other city staff?
Excuse me, for the record, just wanted to announce that council member Kairos came into attendance at approximately 7:15 p.m.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, city manager, members of the public. My name is Anthony Chevria, Public Works Director for the City of Livingston. I'm here to give a general overview within the Public Works Department of recent activity. Feel free to chime in if you guys have any questions for me. I'll start off in the Water Department. We had a well 13 fail due to a power outage last week. Shannon Pump had to come out and troubleshoot the situation because it wouldn't come back online, but within a couple hours it was back online and running. Tony Avina and I started working on a
state-required water audit. Tony and I also met with the Water Board, the Drinking Water Division. I wanted to introduce myself and to see if there's any need that DHS had from the city in a compliance standpoint. We went over a revised permit, and we should be receiving that revised permit here middle of this week. Our streets department, staff laid down some thermoplastic on the crosswalk by the high school on J and Main Street. I also instructed staff to gather a quote from a local company that does thermoplastic application. The quotes will be for crosswalks around all the school sites. And the benefit of using thermoplastic instead of just paint is as follows. Retro reflectivity is low for paint products and medium for thermoplastic. And I'll touch up on that. Retroreflectivity material, they're engineered material to redirect most of the light back toward the source, which gives signs and pavement markings a brighter appearance, especially at nighttime when you're coming to a crosswalk and your headlights are shining on that crosswalk, you're able to see it. And it has a brighter appearance. Thermoplastic is medium, so it's a lot brighter. The lifespan for paint is anywhere from 3 to 36 months, and the lifespan for thermoplastic is 72 months. So we're getting more bang for our buck by going with thermoplastic. Parks and LMDs, staff continues to conduct the day-to-day maintenance on all our parks and LMDs. Staff has also been prepping for the annual Sweet Potato Festival at Max Foster Park. Our wastewater department, staff continues to conduct the day-to-day operations of the plant and lift stations. They've been cleaning out sludge drying beds, responding to collection line blockages, replacing failed floats in the decant tank. I also scheduled a permit file review with the water board and the wastewater side to go over our wastewater discharge permit and our collections file. I've identified a problem within our SSO program and dealing with that issue right now, and I expect to have us in compliance soon once it's resolved. James and I, which is the CPO at the wastewater plant, James Zarate, we had a meeting with EPA today to discuss transitioning from paper reporting to electronic reporting. And this is a reporting of our biosolids at the wastewater plant. Our storm drain stations, staff has been cleaning priority storm drain lines identified in the MS4 program to get ready for our winter season. And we'll be going through all the storm drain pumps to make sure everything's working adequately and we're able to respond and have our pumps working. That's it. Is there any questions for me?
Mr. Mayor? And I always hounded our city manager now, it'll be your turn. On our plan for crack sealing, do we have anything, I know you haven't been on board long enough, but have you guys even started?
Yeah, I've been talking to staff about that, and they've been talking to me about the crack sealing. I've talked to the city manager, we've identified some material. We're going to get that ordered and put a program in place and start addressing some of these crack issues we have on our roads.
Do you think we'll be able to do some before the winter sets in?
Yep. I believe so.
Thank you.
Anything else?
The Memorial Park, the playground equipment, I noticed they had caution tape. Is there something down or that needs to be fixed? Or?
I'll check with that. Staff hasn't said anything yet or addressed it. There might be a water leak there that might need to be repaired.
Oh, okay.
I might have dug that out and waiting for parts to repair. Well, I got, this is my third week and still smiling, still happy to be here. Thank you.
Any other staff? All right, we'll move on to city manager announcements and reports.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, Council, and public, thank you very much. Basically, we've been pretty busy this week. I know there's been a lot of anticipation of Panda opening, and we were able to issue a temporary occupancy permit so that to get them going. Our hope was to get them going on Friday, but unfortunately, the punch list item and some of the actual reports that we needed to be signed off weren't done. And so we worked with them diligently, and today, you've probably seen a huge line over there. So there's still a few minor items that need to be addressed, but nothing that would have prevented them from being opened. So that's great. Also, next week, we plan on having everything in place to be able to issue a building permit for the Livingston Community Health as well. We've been working really close with them. So can't wait to see some dirt moving out there. I know you guys are anxious for that. In addition, I know one of the council members had brought up that if you notice out where the McDonald's is at, for whatever reason, disease, I'm not sure exactly what's causing it, but you've probably seen a lot of those trees out there, the redwood trees that have been dying. So we've addressed that with the property owners, and they're going to go in there and they're going to remove the majority of those trees, and they're going to replace those trees with some really nice trees and some other shrubs. And I anticipate that being completed by the end of October. In addition to that, there is plans by TA just across the street. They're planning on doing a modern facelift to their building and facility, so that should look really, really nice once they get that going. And of course, the Burger King portion as well. Also, I've been working, as you might recall, we've been chatting around and talking about, you know what, it would really be nice if we had kind of like a Casa de Fruta concept here in Livingston. Well, I've been throwing that out, and I've actually had some really good response back from a number of different individuals. And one of them in particular, his name is Dennis Durbin, and he's with Consumables and Out-of-Home Networks. And so we've been brainstorming, talking about this, and I think there should be some funding out there through USDA and even the state, and expand our concept a little bit further, where we might incorporate a visitor center, a kitchen incubator, and of course, where we can sell goods from, not just from the Merced area, but our neighbors in Stanislaus, et cetera. And so I think this is getting traction, and so I'm excited, and I think that we're going somewhere with that. So I just wanted to report back to you on that. And lastly, with regards to the Sweet Potato Festival, staff had another meeting today just to make sure that everything is going good. One of the little mix-up that we had this week was on the irrigation of the fields out there, so they moved in some equipment, but they're going to hold off on moving some other equipment a little bit further in the week, and just prepare for next year and have a little bit better coordination on that. But other than that, unless you have any questions for me, that's my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now we'll move on to city council members. Councilmember McCabe.
Thoughts and prayers are out there with Mexico right now. I did take the time to call each of our sister cities. Everyone is accounted for in our sister cities, so luckily they're far away from where the actual impact took place. It took place in DF. Last week I had the privilege to attend the League of California Cities annual conference. It was very informative. Had some positive conversations with our Attorney General, talked about DACA and really how we need to spread the word as a community that our kids need to look for the free funding programs and stay away from the scam artists that are out there right now. But more importantly is also to express to our communities that the state of California is behind them. We have a very progressive Attorney General. He's actively suing the federal government right now on behalf of DACA and is trying to find as many creative solutions we can to protect our local community who is affected by the rescission of DACA. Beyond that, I learned about emergency preparedness, and embarrassing for me, I don't know what to be scared of. I had a good talk with Chief today. He's going to bring me up to speed with our emergency preparedness plan that we did last year, and I think it might be valuable for us to review it or try to enact what we can. Some cities have notices that go out to their community on how much water they need to keep or different things of that nature. It'd be nice to review it and see what kind of information we should be continuously educating our public with. Beyond that, I attended Water Education for Latino Leaders 2 weeks ago over in Ontario. It's really exciting stuff over there. We're learning a lot and focusing on the human rights to water, and that group will be advocating at the state this coming year to make sure that we do focus not only in our own communities, but the communities around the valley and around the state, how we can find solid solutions to the water going forward. And that's all I have to report this time. Beyond that, I hope everyone comes out to the Sweet Potato Festival. It should be a lot of fun.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember McCain. Councilmember Regular.
Good evening. I just want to report, I also attended the California League of Cities annual conference in Sacramento. Very informative conference, a lot of stuff going on the state level that affects cities. So it's good to attend these kind of meetings and get informed as a lot of things affect our cities, or our city specifically. Other than that, I'm glad to see Panda open. Looks like there's a lot of progress with Motel 6. So I'm glad to hear about the clinic as well. Also, hopefully we have a good turnout. I'm sure we will for the Sweet Potato Festival. So hopefully see a lot of you guys out there. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Sicaros.
Just, first of all, apologies for being late. I guess I won't be late anyway because you've been put on the spot.
We know exactly when you got it.
But nothing much to report. I was invited to Yamato to just talk about our local politics and to the third graders, and it was really a lot of interesting questions, by the way. Also attended to the meet and greet with our local recreation committee. We got to meet all of them, and great people. They got a lot of goals, and we're just here to help them in expanding what their ideas are. And I encourage everybody to come out to the Sweet Potato Festival this weekend. We'll see you guys there.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Pisano.
Just so you know that back in this July, for my birthday, I was given a gift card, and I had many choices, so I chose Panda Express as my gift card back in July. I didn't get a chance yesterday, but today I got a chance to use it. However, I didn't get to eat the food because the kids took it, so it was only $25 on the card, so it was gone. So, but anyway, the card got used today.
That's great.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm sure we'll all be trying out Panda. I know my family went down there and tried it out. Let's see, got invited to, kudos out to Merced Soccer Academy, to Mr. Fernando. Attended with Supervisor Espinoza and Councilmember Sicaros. It was an invitation to Latino leaders and minority leaders. So they're doing some great things over at the Merced Soccer Academy. We didn't get the grant for the soccer fields here, but I'm sure we'll be aggressively, necessarily trying to get soccer fields here, which could open it up to, the local kids and, other counties and cities. We could have tournaments here, and it'd be, great for the kids. Mosquito abatement, nothing new. They continue to test sentinel chickens for West Nile virus. Was there today. And kudos out to my youth football team. We took on a big giant Oakdale, and we didn't win, but we were the first to score on Oakdale 3 touchdowns, so they haven't scored on them yet. So they have a large team, almost 40 kids to my 18 kids. So, we're small, but we're tough. So other than that, don't have anything else. We'll move on to citizen comments. This section of the agenda allows members of the public to address the city council on any item not otherwise on the agenda. Members of the public, when recognized by the mayor, should come forward to the lectern and identify themselves. Comments are normally limited to 3 minutes. In accordance with state open meeting laws, no action will be taken by the city council this evening. For items which are on the agenda this evening, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to address the city council as each item is brought up for discussion.
Catherine Shaw Rodriguez, P.O. Box 163. Just got a couple of questions. I understand that I guess it's the Water Quality Control Board was out our way earlier this year to do their biannual, triannual, whatever you want to call it, complete water system delivery inspection report, and a little kind of like a short version was available. I'm wondering if the full, complete water system inspection report has been finalized and sent to the city yet, and if not, when you might expect it to be here. That's one. And then at the last meeting, you were talking a little bit about the old industrial wastewater treatment plant decommissioning, and mentioned something about, along the lines, is some of it might have been done a little bit sooner, but there was a little bit of pushback from the water board. I was wondering if you could be a little bit more specific and elaborate on what you meant by pushback by the board?
Sure. Thank you very much, Catherine. I will find out about if the actual report on your first question, see if it's complete. And as it relates to the decommissioning, the pushback was from the board. As you know, one of the things they're trying to eliminate from these ponds out there is the nitrates. And so part of decommissioning requires that the property basically be returned to its original state when it was first transferred over, or not transferred, but enter into agreement to use that property. So the pushback had to do with the fact that the nitrate level that they were looking for was not met.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rodrigo Espinoza, Livingston. If we can have somebody from Public Works do some, the fire hydrants on my side of town across the street. I know my neighbor was complaining of getting dark brown water from at his house the other day, so maybe it's, I don't know if it's around my side of town or just around the hydrant, so. Also too, I was walking on 7th Street next to the football field, and there's some bushes that the high school planted, and it goes around over the cyclone fencing, but I guess it's old grows, and it goes into the sidewalk, and people can't walk, so we gotta make sure that that we trim those, and also people are able to walk at night. There's a lot of people walking around the high school on the sidewalk, and also too, 7th Street and Peach dead end, that fencing that the high school put in as reflective, I know it looks pretty ugly, and it needs to be probably painted over. It has a reflective orange on it, so if we can make sure that we paint it, and it will probably, the wood should be able to last longer, and just to make sure that we upkeep that reflective and as a safety issue, and also to make sure, I was gonna say, don't get mad if I don't show your pictures or like your pictures on Facebook, somebody might not like it, so, okay, so thanks.
It's still open, anyone else? All right, well, thank you. I forgot Mayor's report, thanks to Public Works, and thank you, Jose. The residents were happy that that ivy was trimmed back on that wall. They were getting rats coming across from the fields and making a nest in there, so it's, they're a lot happier, so appreciate that. Still open, anyone else? Okay, we'll close it at 7:45, and we'll move on to consent agenda. Items on the consent calendar are considered routine or non-controversial and will be enacted by one vote unless separate action is requested by the city manager or city council member. There will be no separate discussion of those items unless members of the city council or city manager request the specific items be removed. Consent agenda item 1, waive second reading and adopt ordinance number 631, adding chapter 9, electric vehicle charging station permits to Title 4 of the Livingston Municipal Code to provide for an expedited, streamlined permitting process for electric vehicle charging stations. Item 2, approval of warrant register dated September 15th to 2017. So bring it back.
Motion to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
Motion by Vice Mayor, second by Councilmember McCabe.
Okay, roll call. Councilmember McCabe?
Aye.
Councilmember Aguilar?
Yes.
Councilmember Sicairos?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra?
Yes.
Mayor Soria?
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Moving on to discussion and potential action items. Council, I'd like to move up item 5 before 3 if there are no issues. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 5 next. Discussion regarding local implementation of Macrusa Medical and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act and the city's options related to cannabis business and cultivation. This item will be include a PowerPoint presentation by Mr. Tim Cromartie, League of California Cities.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, at one of the last supervisors meetings, there was a presentation, and it was very informative, and I approached city manager about having something here and working with Jose Sanchez. We were fortunate to have Tim Cromartie from Sacramento, from League of Cities. He's one of the heavy hitters in Sacramento, along with our illustrious attorney, and we're just fortunate to have him here and present on the pending laws and regulations of recreational marijuana. Here's Mr. Cromartie.
Thank you, Chief Chavez. I want to thank you and the council for the opportunity to address you tonight. We spent a lot of time in Sacramento developing this information, but it didn't really have any meaning unless we get it out to the local communities. So the goals here are to update you on the state rules on cannabis since June 17 and the enactment of Senate Bill 94. There's a lot of confusion because, first of all, there was Prop 64, which was enacted in November of last year. Then we had SB 94 that was signed in June. Then this fall, there was the announcement, earlier this summer, there was the announcement that the medical regulations were going to be recalled, and there was a lot of consternation about that. So we want to provide you with some guidance on how you can update your ordinance, comply with the new laws, and encourage you to begin this process as soon as possible, because even though the state has not yet finalized its regulations, we pretty much know at this point what they're going to look like. It's not as much of a moving target as it may seem, and we have a pretty good snapshot of what the rules are going to be, so we want to provide you with that tonight. So, how did we get here? First, there was Prop 215 in 1996, which basically said folks could have access to medical marijuana, but there was nothing in it to explain how it was going to work. So for the next 20 years almost, we had no action, except for in 2003, there was the medical marijuana program creating the voluntary ID card program, expanded immunity for patients and caregivers. Finally, in 2015, we got the medical Cannabis Act, which was a bit more conservative than what Prop 64 allows, because it preserved local control up to and including the ability to ban indoor cultivation. Prop 64 came along and it's largely based on the Medical Act above it, but it changes the rules, because the key thing to remember is that locals can reasonably regulate, but they cannot ban. Cities and counties cannot ban indoor cultivation for personal use. You can regulate it, and there's, I think, a city, Fontana, is in litigation right now because there's a dispute over whether their permitting process is a reasonable regulation. But I'll talk more about that later. And then earlier this year, we have the SB 94, which reconciled the Medical Act with Prop 64. There was yet another trailer bill the governor signed over the weekend, which fine-tuned the law still further, but there were no dramatic changes. I will have a little synopsis of what that most recent trailer bill, AB 133, did. That was just signed over the weekend. Okay, so the thing to remember here is that you retain full regulatory authority over all commercial cannabis businesses, whether they're adult use or recreational. That means, in a nutshell, that you can decide, number one, the threshold issue of whether you're even going to allow them in your community, and your local control, your municipal constitutional police power, and your land use authority are completely intact with regard to those commercial businesses. You can ban them completely, and you can allow them to the degree that you believe it's feasible. Now, delivery services are a business activity. They fall within your land use and police powers. Therefore, you can ban deliveries if that's what you choose to do. There's been a lot of information flying around since Prop 64 that locals can't ban deliveries. Of course they can, because they're clearly defined in the law, the new laws, as a business activity over which you have retained full regulatory powers. Now, the dirty little secret is that you can prohibit deliveries, but if they are, as they are likely to be, if they're in unmarked vehicles, it's really hard to enforce that ban. It's hard to police it unless you've got some means of doing it short of, roadblocks. Some cities have taken the proactive step of allowing to put out to bid, literally, a contract, so they award a franchise to one particular entity to do deliveries, and everybody else is prohibited. So that may help them to enforce the illicit deliveries at least. This is important to remember also. Commercial outdoor cultivation can still be banned, including, commercial indoor cultivation can still be banned. You can also ban outdoor cultivation for personal use. But if you ban outdoor cultivation, either commercial or for personal use, you may forfeit the eligibility for grant monies from locals under Prop 64. I'll talk more about that later. The medical regulations were based on, this is why the medical regulations had to be recalled. It was a predictable move on the part of the state. The medical regs were based on the MCRSA, the act that was signed in 2015, the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. They didn't reflect Prop 64, or the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, or SB 94, which is the trailer bill, reconciling the two. The planned recall of these regulations in September is predictable, it's necessary, because they've got to now update the law to reflect the recent changes reconciling the medical and the adult use systems. The basic structure of the regulatory structure is going to remain the same. There will be new regulations covering licensing fees, micro businesses, over-concentration, which is having too many businesses in a particular part of the city, and advertising, which are areas not covered by the MCRSA regulations. Now, the emergency regulations, which the state is going to put out, reconciling the medical and adult use, they are the next iteration. Since they recalled the medical, they're coming out in November. They'll be similar to the original medical regulations in most respects. State agencies are going to provide 5 days public notice, and there's going to be a 5-day calendar day period after that for public comment. So there's a very short window to get any comments in, which is of some concern, but not too much, because we had an opportunity the first time around for public comment. Okay, indoor cultivation must be allowed, and the rule is 6 plants per residence, not 6 plants per adult. It's important to remember. It can be 6 plants in a separate granny unit or greenhouse as well, but it has to be on the same property. It cannot be visible from a public space, and it really, if it's in an outdoor structure, that structure ought to be secured with a lock of some kind. So it's got to be a secure structure. Pre-Prop 64 bans on indoor cultivation for personal use. They were struck down by operation of law the minute the Prop 64 was enacted by the voters. You can reasonably regulate, but you can't ban, as I said earlier. You can still prohibit indoor cultivation. Fontana is in litigation right now. I believe they had a permitting scheme involving a $400 licensing fee, but the thing that really, I think, triggered the lawsuit was that they have a criminal background check, and it's not clear why it's necessary to have a criminal background check if it's just indoor cultivation for personal use. It's not going to be shared with anybody, and it's not a commercial operation, so they're not planning to buy or sell it. So I think it's being challenged in part on that basis. So bans on cultivation or retail sale of cannabis will terminate eligibility for grant funds. And that includes a ban on outdoor personal cultivation, as I said earlier. But, and this is a big but, if you want a cannabis-related revenue stream, we encourage you to enact your own tax, put it on the local ballot so it's compliant with Propositions 26 and 218. Remember that sales tax on medical is now prohibited, but there are advantages here, because if you enact a tax rather than relying on grant money from the state, number one, you have exclusive control over that revenue stream. It's not going to go away, but the state grants will. So just something to keep in mind. General rules on manufacturing. And manufacturing covers everything from baked goods, edibles, to extraction. And extraction, all forms of extraction were totally illegal until last year when AB 2679 was signed, and that codified a legal form of extraction based on a similar form of extraction they use in the food services industry. If you're compliant with all these factors, you can extract. Most extraction that's going to be done commercially is probably going to use non-volatile solvents, as opposed to butane, which is a volatile solvent and can be very explosive, create fire hazards. But regardless of the form, it's either solventless, which is a lot safer, or if it is a solvent-based extraction process, all of those factors have to be present, and they've got to comply with them all. Closed-loop system. Equipment is certified by a licensed engineer. It's approved by your local fire officials. You've got a valid local permit for it. It's compliant with specific engineering and fire safety standards, which are laid out in statute right now, and they're compliant with the fire code and building standards in your jurisdiction. At your local ordinances, if you choose to allow manufacturing in Livingston, your local ordinance should require compliance with these state standards at a minimum, because it's easier for you. You can just look up what the standards are, and it's easier to enforce if you have something in statute. That is why the league and others resisted taking that out of statute. They wanted to put it in regulations. We said, no, for the sake of transparency and enforceability, leave it in statute. What are you doing? So they backed off on that. Local governments and cannabis businesses alike should take note of a change. They have redefined volatile solvent. It means a solvent that produces a flammable gas or vapor that, when present in the air, can explode or ignite. And that's in the Health and Safety Code. Testing facilities. Testing are a critical part of the regulatory process because the state has no way to enforce the health and safety standards for cannabis without the testing labs. So they will deal with measuring purity, potency and concentration, and respective ratio of cannabidiols. You've heard that high THC is the psychoactive substance that gets you high, but a high quantity of CBD can have more healing or analgesic properties depending on the ailment. So they'll be addressing those things. And those concentrations, if you're using cannabis for medical purposes, those concentrations become really important. Not so much on the recreational side. Those regs are now being written by the state. Local ordinances at a minimum should require compliance with the state standards, whatever they're going to be. We took a crack at them in writing the medical law. The state is now going to have a much more detailed iteration of what the testing requirements are in regulations. Now, this is distribution. A lot of cities are hesitant to allow distribution. Basically, it's like a a trucking warehouse, because it's going to basically, they will have transport that is headquartered in your city, and they'll be moving vehicles back and forth, moving product. And some cities just aren't interested in that, but that is a potential revenue generator for cities as well as the cultivation and retail. They defined it as procurement, sale, and transport of cannabis. These entities are licensed by the state to perform transport, collect the state excise tax, and verify the quality control, including the testing. Distributors must be locally permitted in at least one local jurisdiction, but they can operate anywhere in the state once they have been locally permitted as well as licensed by the state. Local bans don't authorize any city to prevent distributors from using roads and highways just to move product through, as long as they're not trying to deliver, if you have a delivery ban. If you allow a distribution center to operate in your jurisdiction, you may want to simply follow whatever the state regulations are in these areas. And distributors do not make deliveries. Deliveries are transported to a particular customer, so they're going to be much smaller amounts. Distribution, on the other hand, think truckloads full of product. And the state's going to issue licenses starting January 2nd. The state requires licensees to only conduct business with other licensees. This provision could interrupt the flow of cannabis to consumers in the first months when they're first getting the licensing online. There's a concern about whether they're going to issue enough of them. So they plan to issue temporary licenses on a fast-track basis, primarily concentrating on businesses that are already locally permitted in local jurisdictions. This is what that is going to look like. They'll be valid for 4 months. There's an option to extend them for another 90 days at the state's discretion. They're primarily going to be issued to operators, again, who have local approval already. The applicants for state licensure have to complete and submit all the application requirements by the time the permit expires. And you can, if you're currently authorized, you can continue to operate lawfully in the short term. But those who are coming online for the first time are probably not going to be able to avail themselves of this process. Now, here's what the state needs from local governments. If you have, am I correct that you have no businesses in your jurisdiction currently? Okay, we can skip this. In general, here's what cities should do to get ready for the initial rollout. Your interests are going to be best served by enacting a local ordinance sooner rather than later. We do not recommend waiting for the final state regulations because they may not be ready until the spring. And the wrinkle here is that you have only 60 days from the date the letter hits the city manager's desk informing you that there's a business that's got an application to open up shop in your jurisdiction. Now, if you currently have a ban in place, you don't have to worry about that. But other cities that have no ordinance at all or have some type of regulatory structure, they do need to be concerned. If you have no ordinance at all, if your ordinances are silent on both medical and recreational cannabis, then you need to be concerned and you need to get started, even if you just enact a ban. The reason is, if you have nothing on the books, the state can technically, in full compliance with the law, go ahead and issue a license to operate in your city, because state law provides that state licenses can't be issued if they're in violation of local ordinances. But if you have no ordinance on the books that speaks to that land use, then technically it's not in violation of local ordinances at all, and there's no impediment to the state issuing a license. Now, what the state is telling us is that as a practical matter, they probably won't do that. If they choose not to do it, it's probably because they don't want to be sued. But legally, they can. Please be aware of that. Under SB 94, if a local jurisdiction has no ordinance, I just covered that. And again, if the business activity will violate local ordinances, the state is prohibited from doing it. But if you have nothing on the books, then it's open season. There's one city that's in litigation right now because they denied use to an adult use business based on an ordinance that banned medical cannabis only. They had nothing in place on adult use. I believe this is City of Anaheim. And the business contacted the city once they got the rejection letter saying that their permit application had been rejected. And they said, why? Well, we have a ban. No, you don't. Your ban is medical only, and I want to do recreational sales. When we have a ban, you're denied. Okay, we'll see you in court. So now they're tied up in litigation. But we have been warning cities for over a year now to get started on that this change in law was coming, and it's a good time to get started. Now, why should you care? Why should you expedite or update this? Number one, you can lose control over your land use decisions, at least temporarily, if the state issues a license based on your city having no relevant ordinance in place. Two, that business may be able to operate lawfully until two things happen. One is your city enacts an ordinance, even if it's a ban. And two, that business license comes up for renewal, and that's a year down the road. So that's something to be concerned about. Cities also could be sued for denying a permit if there's no ordinance covering the specific activity, because you've got nothing on the books to base the denial on. And then finally, failing to enact an ordinance. And some of these are shakedown lawsuits that are frivolous, but you still have to waste time and money defending against them. Some cities have actually been sued because they don't have ordinances in place yet, even though there's a good argument that you may not have had sufficient time. So there's things going on out there to be aware of. A moratorium may not be a valid ordinance from the state's point of view, so if you feel like you need more time to study the issue, the best thing to do is enact a ban. Our attorneys are confident that that will count as a local regulation until you decide to agendize something and bring it for the council's consideration. So getting started, if you have a medical ordinance in place already, it's an easier task. If you don't have that, we have a resource on our website which has both adult use ordinances as well as medical ordinances. The medical ordinance can literally be cut and pasted and modified literally, because there's two or three major changes between medical and adult use. Number one is you can no longer impose sales tax on medical cannabis, and you can no longer ban indoor cultivation for personal use. Other than that, the rules are largely identical. It really just depends on what do you want the rules to be in your city? What are the allowable land uses? What are the types of licensed businesses you might be inclined to entertain? And what do you want not any part of? So, and how restrictive do you want it to be? Do you want to allow just one dispensary? Then you're towing the water, or do you want to start with 5, what have you? So there's a variety of different approaches that are on our website, and these are actual ordinances that other cities have enacted. We only have a handful of adult use ordinances at the moment. But we're getting more as more of these things come online. But none of these is a silver bullet. It really depends on what the priorities are in your city. So you can update that. I just explained how you can do that. The find and replace, sales tax on medical. Be aware that other local taxes on medicinal and adult use other than sales tax are totally valid. So the only one you need to worry about is no sales tax on medicinal. You can impose any other type of excise tax on medicinal as well as recreational. No bans on indoor cultivation for personal use. And this is just a checklist of things to think about, what activities you want to allow. Cultivation, indoor versus outdoor commercial, outdoor personal use. Many cities prohibit outdoor cultivation for personal use simply because they don't want to deal with the nuisance complaints from the neighbors, because they will show up at your city council meetings, guaranteed. Retail operations, retail with on-site indoor cultivation, retail without any indoor cultivation allowed. And there's traditional storefront operations, which is versus non-traditional storefront, which is basically a warehouse that makes deliveries. That is preferred in some jurisdictions by, particularly by law enforcement, because it eliminates the foot traffic of customers in and out with the public safety problems that go on with that. Very often, there's a risk that customers coming in, they've got a lot of cash because they're planning to buy cannabis, so they may get robbed on the way in. They've got $50, $60, or a few $100 worth of cannabis on the way out, they may get robbed on the way out. So you can sort of move all that potential criminal activity away from the commercial business by going with a non-traditional storefront. It's strictly a local choice. And then there's micro businesses, which is a combination of licensed activities, whether it's manufacturing, cultivation, retail, et cetera. And that might take the form of like a mini office park, depending on your zoning preferences in your city. Manufacturing, do you want to impose local requirements that are different or from the state, or it may be simpler to rely on state requirements in that area? I highlighted what some of those are. Same is true with testing. Those are two highly technical areas where it may be best to rely on state requirements unless you've got in-house expertise, or you can contract for it at reasonably affordable rates. Then distribution. Do you want to impose local requirements, or do you want to rely on state requirements if you allow a distribution center in your jurisdiction? Testing, same thing. Testing ordinances can be among the most challenging because they're probably among the more technical, but the labs, if you allow them, should be required all testing in compliance with the code section, Business and Professions Code, and subject to additional regulations as they're being developed and modified by the state. Because on the testing in particular, this is a work in progress. They're still learning what these requirements at the state level need to look like. This just says the accreditation. That has to do with the accuracy of the measuring equipment. They've got a requirement to destroy the remains of the samples, and testing laboratories must dispose of any waste byproduct. So currently, the state law does not clearly define co-location of businesses. In other words, let's allow adult use with a medical in the same spot. So they allow it, but it's not precisely defined. We expect that the emergency regulations are going to address that. There's anecdotal information out of Colorado that co-location of the medical and adult use is necessary to ensure that the medical market continues to survive, because the profit motive is probably going to be more on the recreational side. And depending on the demographics in a given area, there may not be enough demand for medical to keep it afloat if it's the only business allowed. This is CEQA. The important thing here is that there is definitely a CEQA analysis that has to take place, but there's an exemption that most local governments are going to be able to apply for. It won't apply, CEQA analysis will not need to be done if an ordinance, rule, or regulation is adopted by a local jurisdiction requiring discretionary review and approval of permits, licenses, or other authorizations to engage in commercial activity, cannabis activity. So as long as you have a discretionary review process, you may not need to worry about CEQA at all. But it's cited there, and we can certainly make this PowerPoint available to you by email if you have questions or want to follow up on it. So I will skip the rest of this. A lot of people see CEQA and they get completely panicked. So I do not want to do that to you. Now, your obligations to the state. You have got to provide a copy of your local ordinances to the Bureau of Cannabis Control and Department of Consumer Affairs. They will distribute your ordinance, even if it's a ban, to all the licensing entities. So you only got to submit it to one entity, and they need that information to know what the rules are in your jurisdiction, because if they start getting applications for a city of Livingston and you have a ban, it's important for them to know that. It's also important for them to know, if you allow any of these businesses, what your local regulatory structure is. For example, if you don't allow cultivation at all, and you allow maybe just a handful of retail, they need to know that. So it's important, I think, and we advise cities to do this, don't just submit the ordinance. Attach an executive summary that explains in plain English what is and is not allowed under your ordinance. Otherwise, you will have some mid-level civil servant, and I've been that person, so I know. They may be interpreting your ordinance, and you don't want to be in that situation because bad things can happen. They can screw it up, they can make mistakes, they may not read it carefully. So the executive summary, preferably in what I call comic book English, is a good idea. Not an express requirement, but again, it's recommended. The city should also designate a specific individual who is going to be the local point of contact with the state on any regulatory inquiries on cannabis. If you don't do it, it will default to your city clerk. So the city clerk will go to those inquiries. And it's incumbent upon locals to update the state if you have any amendment or change to your local ordinances going forward. If you have a ban and you later decide to allow a limited number of retail businesses, you've got to send them that information and give them a heads up. So these are the state licensing entities and the Division of Labor. Bureau of Cannabis Control within Department of Consumer Affairs handles distribution, testing, retail and micro businesses. Department of Food and Ag, cultivation only. Department of Public Health does the manufacturing licenses. So those are the contact emails for each one of those departments. If you have questions, this is my contact information as well as David. Now, full disclosure, the League of Cities developed this PowerPoint presentation completely on our own. I asked David to join with me because this is the same information that we covered in a webinar on August 31st for our members statewide. He formerly worked at City of Oakland, and he helped develop a local regulatory structure complete with audits and a taxation structure that predated any of these major state laws, starting with medical cannabis. So he was kind of a pathfinder on what does a local regulatory structure, independent of the state, look like. A local regulatory structure that's self-sufficient. So I thought it would be good, and he is an excellent resource to have on the webinar to deal with some of the more complex inquiries from cities. But we developed this presentation on our own. I actually have been working on cannabis issues since 2013. I helped write parts of the Medical Cannabis Act that Prop 64 is based on, and the league and the police chiefs, unions, and the counties, to a lesser degree, have been active in a major fight to retain most of those strong regulatory provisions as we move forward from purely medical to recreational. With the recreational, once Prop 64 passed, there was a push in Sacramento to try to throw all the rules on medical out and just start with sort of what amounted to deregulation of the industry on the eve of the state regulations coming out. So we've been very active in trying to keep a cohesive, meaningful, robust regulatory structure that will meet the needs of both state and local governments, and also hopefully pass muster with the federal government, because they put out a Cole memorandum in summer of 2013 listing 8 priorities that, hey, states, if you want to legalize and you don't do these 8 things, then you're going to be a priority for federal enforcement. So among them was, don't facilitate the spread of the product to children, and have some robust regulatory provisions in place so that we don't have to worry about the fact that you've legalized allows the spread of this product to neighboring states. As far as the Federal Department of Justice is concerned, and this is pre the Trump administration, even under the Obama administration, the Department of Justice felt that Colorado had not met the standard on both counts. So those are 2 of the 8 litmus tests I know that will potentially trigger quick federal action. I want to just cover briefly, I just wrote this up this afternoon, what's in the cannabis trailer bill the governor signed over the weekends. They wanted initially to have applicants be able to submit evidence of local control, local approval to the state, and if they did that, then the state would unilaterally just decide, well, this is approved then. It's like, we're like, wait a minute. The only entity that should verify compliance with local ordinances is local government. So let's fix that. So they went back and they added a provision. It's not sufficient, but it moves us back in the right direction. We'll be working with them in the coming weeks to clarify that through regulations. It delays the date for the State Water Resources Control Board to accept permits on water use and diversion from July to October 1st of this year. And there are a number of other provisions, just fine-tuning the regulatory structure. Nothing really to be concerned about. But the bulk of the information you need in terms of your deliberations on what to do in your city is here and on our website. I'll take any questions.
Any questions, council?
So I sat in on a couple of webinars, and they were saying that they didn't have our ordinance in place by January 1st, and actually permitting by January 1st, then businesses would not be able to apply until July of 2018. Is that accurate, or is that wrong?
That's not true. The January 1st deadline is a deadline for the state to begin licensing. It's not a deadline for local governments. Now, having said that, it is true that the state will not be able to issue permits if you have no ordinance in place. They can't issue a license if you have no ordinance in place, because they need to know for certain whether or not the proposed use in the application is in violation of local ordinance. If you have no ordinance in place, they're kind of stuck. And again, there's a loophole there. Because legally, they've said, well, then we're not going to proceed and we're not going to issue a license. But I've read Prop 64, I've read SB 94, and they could change their minds and be within the law and decide if you don't have an ordinance in place, we're going to go ahead and issue one, and you can address the issue when you do have a regulatory structure in place, which may mean you just have a business that you have to deal with until that license is up for renewal. In weird cities, in an abundance of caution, it may seem like we're being overly a little paranoid, but in an abundance of caution, we urge cities, don't get caught in that situation. It's better to have an ordinance in place, and even if you feel like you have no ability or maybe motivation at the moment to get a regulatory structure in place in the short term between now and the end of the year, then enact a ban, because that can literally serve as a placeholder and give you whatever time you need to develop a regulatory structure, have the city manager, city attorney, law enforcement, code enforcement, fire services, get them all in the room and talk about what you want to do and whether it's within their comfort zone and what resources they need. Because one of the discussions you'll need to have is, let's say you want to do a limited amount of cultivation and have, 5 businesses in the city. There are going to be law enforcement impacts, there are going to be health and safety inspections that are required. You want to talk to your code enforcement, your law enforcement, your fire services, particularly if you want to allow manufacturing. You want to talk to the fire services and get a sense from them of, A, is this in your comfort zone? And B, what do you think it's going to cost? How many man hours or what have you? And then you scale your regulatory fees appropriately, because whatever regulatory fees you have, like the local permit fee or business license fee for that particular activity, it should be scaled to cover all of your, 100% of your regulatory costs. That's how Oakland did it, which is, again, one of the reasons I had David join me. And then if you should enact a local tax, all of that is gravy that goes into your general fund. It's not, you're not having part of it siphoned off to deal with the regulatory costs. So that's just a strategic approach. But getting back to the January 1st deadline, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, you're only going to have 60 days from the time the letter from the state hits the city manager's desk advising the city that you have we're in possession of an application within the city of Livingston to open up a retail business. Please advise us on what your regulatory structure looks like. You've got 60 days. You don't want to be behind the 8 ball having to scramble to develop an ordinance at that point, and there's no need. Because again, you can just, if it's an issue of we really need time to wrap our minds around this, then we urge locals to enact a ban. That's a bona fide ordinance. It can be in place indefinitely until you're ready.
So let's say we issue permits come February or March. That's not going to prevent those businesses from actively starting while they wait for the state permits to be approved?
They would not be able to start because until you actually issued a local permit sometime during the month of February, the state literally is taking the view that they can't issue a state license because they have no idea what the local regulatory structure is.
So the temporary ones are only the ones enacted prior to January. Is that what that means?
For the local businesses that are already permitted by locals as of January 1st, yes. The temporary licenses are really geared toward them. Oh, yeah, the Cole memo, I'll go into a little more detail about that. Under the Obama administration, it was named for Deputy Attorney General James Cole in the U.S. Justice Department. They laid out, this memo is about 5 or 6 pages. It lays out an awareness that some states are legalizing cannabis, and it lays out for them, here are the things you need to avoid if you don't want to be a priority for federal enforcement activity. And again, I can email it to you, but I only remember 2 of the points, which I talked about earlier. One is facilitating the spread of the product to minors and facilitating the spread of the product to other states. But it laid out 6 other priorities that if the DOJ made the assessment that, okay, California's violated these, then it's definitely increases the likelihood that you're going to see federal enforcement activity. Now, there's been a lot of saber rattling with the new administration and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Cole memo was quote-unquote under review. Well, they have reviewed it and they haven't repealed it. So it hasn't changed. They may have tweaked it around the edges, and we've been trying to get hold of what are the tweaks. But it has not been repealed. It is still the most noteworthy, important piece of federal guidance from the Federal Department of Justice on what do we need to do to avoid federal intervention. And a lot of people in Sacramento have argued, well, intervention is going to come anyway because Trump hates California. Well, we're trying to stick to what are the legal bases for potential intervention, and let's avoid those because they've been laid out in black and white in this document that the new administration and the new Attorney General have not rescinded. They've basically said by default, it is still in place, it is still in force. So it is definitely something to pay attention to. And we have, it often falls on deaf ears in Sacramento because the legislature likes to behave as though, regardless of who the president is, the legislature often likes to behave as though the federal government doesn't exist. But we remind them, look, the feds, don't bait them. You can literally trigger federal intervention if you get sloppy on parts of the regulatory and enforcement structure at the state level. And the league and the police chiefs have been arguing that consistently for the last 2 years with some success. But it's kind of like you've got to pound at the door and eventually they get the message.
I'm going to open up for any questions from the public.
Can I provide more info before the? Yeah. So before the questions from the public, if I could provide a little more info just on Livingston. Currently, the city does have a ban on both commercial and medical. We're going to be looking at it. We're going to be bringing something to you regardless, just cleaning up the personal cultivation. As Tim mentioned, we all know Prop 64 allows, and you cannot ban indoor cultivation of 6 plants. But that's indoor cultivation. It's not outdoor cultivation. You can still ban all outdoor. One of the things that's going to be important here, and part of this workshop, is also to get a little more guidance from the council as far as what the council would like to see from the uses. The reality is, and I'm working with a jurisdiction right now that really decided to allow everything. Has decided to allow, when we're talking about commercial, has decided to allow cultivation, up to 2 dispensaries, manufacturing, testing, storage, distribution, delivery, micro businesses. Allow it all, only limited the dispensaries to 2, and that's for commercial purposes. For cultivation, they're allowing the 6 indoors, because they can't control that, right? You can't ban that. They're regulating how it's cultivated, and they decided to allow 3 plants outdoors for medical purposes. Different from the recreational. So medical, if you have the medical card, you can still go ahead and cultivate 3 outdoors, and then they also allowed a detached structure for medical. Now, different county. Now we're talking about Sonoma County area versus, the Central Valley. I know that's different.
Riverbank opened up everything.
They decided to do as well. But opening up everything, and the discussion here really goes towards, does the council see a difference between medical and commercial? Because you see some jurisdictions say, well, we're going to treat medical, like for example, medical dispensaries or medical commercial different than the recreational. You could still distinguish those. A lot of jurisdictions are saying cannabis is cannabis. We're going to treat it all the same. The questions here for the council really, and when Tim had a great slide of I think it was the checklist where he walks through in his presentation the crafting of the ordinance, going through cultivation, retail operations, et cetera. Just because you allow something and just because you have state regulations, if you went down that avenue, I have an ordinance here that's 35 pages, and that's aside from what the state says. Right? It's highly regulated, and I would encourage the council, if you go that direction, you're still going to want to regulate a lot. When we're ready, we could have the council could have the discussion and kind of just go through that. And again, very nice slides on the crafting a local ordinance, a checklist, to see what the council thinks. Regarding the tax, our next election, general election, is next year, November. That's when you could get something on the tax. Tim mentioned going ahead and placing a tax on the ballot. Jurisdictions have done that. Jurisdictions did that even before they had an ordinance in place in order to have that tax on the background. One of the taxes that I worked on, the jurisdiction actually decided to go and put it out to the voters of having it be up to 10%. Now, I can tell you that the industry says if you tax us 10%, we'll never go into your jurisdiction. But what the jurisdiction did was go up to 10% and let it be the jurisdiction's option to go down and up, as long as it doesn't go over the 10%. The only reason I bring that up is because the city of Livingston does not have that in place right now. We could discuss whether we go to a special election. There's certain requirements to go through a special election. You know, you definitely would want a general tax versus a special tax. That way you go ahead and put it onto your general fund. You had a question, council member.
So how do development agreements work? So are we able to source revenues for the local community through development agreements with this that would not be considered a tax, or is that fine line?
Now, you have jurisdictions that have been approached by different businesses. A city that's close to you ended up being approached by a manufacturer, and the manufacturer basically volunteering through a development agreement to go ahead and give certain amount of money to the city in order, development agreement is a tool through land use in order to get projects in. They decided to go that avenue. That would be an option. However, once you open up your ordinance, once you say, okay, here are the rules, you can't require development agreements under land use law. Those are voluntary, but these types of businesses, you could write your ordinance to make it difficult unless you get some type of DA.
I mean, like, so Riverbank, they did a requirement, so you have to get a CUP, and then you have to get a development agreement to have any cannabis businesses. Why would we be prohibited from doing that?
They probably went under a different type of agreement, not the traditional DA. That's under the land use. I could show you the government code, which says that you can't force folks to get a DA.
Okay, great.
But I'm pretty sure it was just another types of agreements. Once you issue a CUP, you could put conditions, and now you're into really negotiations about conditions, which could lead to, okay, now we're entering into agreements. That's obviously, several jurisdictions have already begun to do that. But really, the conversation I think that the council should have is, again, pointing out the two slides, really helpful to walk through, to just kind of see what the council wants. Again, my office is already working on an ordinance right now regarding cultivation. So we could put reasonable regulations on the personal cultivation. And the cultivation, that's the 6 plants indoors, right? Currently the city council bans all indoor cultivation. However, as Tim mentioned, by operation of law, that ban doesn't apply to the 6 plants that the new proposition allows folks to cultivate indoors. You still have your ban for outdoors, except you're allowed 2 for medical. So there's no recreational outdoors allowed right now. We're going to be cleaning up that language to make it clear. Given Prop 64, we'll go ahead and clean up a lot of that and just make it, with the new lingo, right, with the new terminology. We're working on that, but that's, just wanted to provide a little more of a landscape of what's out there and what you're really talking about here and where you're most likely, the conversation is going to go.
Thank you, Say, for refreshing our memory on those codes, and open up to public, and then we'll bring it back.
Catherine Shell Rodriguez again. I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this. Thank you for coming here and bringing us this presentation and giving us this information to hopefully move the discussion along just a little bit faster. I mean, we've known this train has been coming around the bend, and it's about ready to run us over. So, just again, I just want to say thank you for bringing this to us. I really, really, really appreciate the time that you're taking to come here and share this with us.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
I wanted to add a comment about indoor cultivation, because there's some regulatory issues with that we're aware of that we want to share. Many cities are not doing what Fontana is doing, which is we're going to have everybody, there's going to be a cultivation permit protocol. Most cities are not going to be engaged proactively in going in and doing inspections, making sure people are adhering to the 6-plant limitation. The because it's costly, there's a privacy issue going into people's homes, who does it, is it going to be law enforcement, code enforcement? It's just kind of a can of worms nobody wants to open in most jurisdictions. However, if you get nuisance complaints based on indoor cultivation, it's probably going to be because somebody is significantly exceeding the 6-plant limitation. Because if they are exceeding the 6-plant limitation and there's other housing nearby, the neighbors are going to smell it. And what do you do then? There are a couple of things that you want to have complaint-based inspection protocols. You may want to have an ordinance in place that covers that. And some of the issues are, if they are significantly exceeding the 6-plant limitation, like maybe they got 50 plants instead of 6, there's going to be a couple of issues. Number one, they're using probably a lot of heat lamps, which are pulling a lot of electricity. Now, our fire chiefs tell me that if it's a residential structure and they're significantly exceeding the 6-plant limitation, they've probably got so many heat lamps going that they're pulling more power into that structure, more electricity than it's designed to withstand at any one time, and that can constitute a 24-hour-a-day fire hazard. Our fire chief's department tells me that. So for reasons of public safety, you may want to go in and do inspections. Again, once you get complaints for issues having to do with electrical safety and compliance with the code. If they do have that many more plants, they're using an awful lot of water, and if it's not well ventilated, there may be moisture buildup, which can lead to mold, which can be life-threatening. So there's a health and safety piece to that as well. So those are just two issues that may come up, and you may want to try to factor that into the ordinance long-term if you decide to go down that road.
Thank you, Tim. That was a good presentation. I appreciate it. And this opportunity for us to come together, hear from all the stakeholders, and do what's best for Livingston. And you brought up some good points. I know from a public safety standpoint, we will have some potential issues with the safety of we have certain items here, but also I can think of the nuisance. Many times you might smell marijuana. You shouldn't be able to smell marijuana being smoked in public. The one thing that concerns me is edibles, with the kids. That's something that's kind of something we really need to keep an eye on. But I appreciate you coming out again, Tim. And again, I'm sure the fire chief also, with the fire potential things for us to look at. The other thing to look at is a potential funding source for a full-time code enforcement officer, because that's going to be needed. And anything we could do to help implement that would be great. I know we're going to have the part-time company that does specific areas in the city, but I think a full-time code enforcement officer is something that's going to be needed for this next passage of this bill. So anyways, thank you again, Tim. Appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Corneli, thank you for that presentation. Thank you for coming down from Sacramento. So we got a little bit of work to do. So do you see anything down in the future about just the odor, or someone smoking in their backyard and you're having a barbecue and they're coming out, and you see any regulations or any of that coming where it's offensive to, you don't want to be in your backyard, smelling it either, so.
We haven't seen those so far, but it's early yet. A lot of these local ordinances are just coming online. We do, even in Sacramento, in downtown Sacramento, if you walk from our office, which is 3 blocks from the Capitol to the Capitol, half the time you will smell cannabis on your way. So it's very public, it's very much out there, and there's probably going to be increasing incidents like that. An important note on edibles: the edibles are dangerous because they're not the edibles of the Cheech and Chong days where you see them sprinkling leaves into the brownies. If they inject cannabis into the edibles, it's in concentrated form. So it's much more potent, and they're putting them in cookies, gummy bears, brownies, etc. nowadays, and for minors, they are most drawn to the edibles for that reason, because now it's in a form that is familiar to them, that they already like, whether it's a gummy bear or a candy or a brownie, and so that's particularly something to be aware of. For that reason, some cities have decided to either ban edibles altogether or to ban certain types of edibles that they know may be appealing to children. Just FYI.
All right, thank you. to item 3, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with WC3 West Coast Consultants.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council. We went ahead and we parted way with Four Leaf, their last day.
Let's just go back to item 5. Does council want to have a discussion, sorry, Jose, discussion on item 5?
And I think that discussion should be had, again, right now, we're preparing at least your cultivation, and we're cleaning up the current state of the law that you currently have in your books, which is a ban. Right now, you do have a ban in place. We're cleaning up some terminology and, again, making updating the lingo. But the reason I kept bringing up the slides is, is the council interested in some of what, Tim mentioned, for example, cultivation, and I'm not talking about personal cultivation, just focusing on commercial right now. Is commercial cultivation, whether for medical purposes or for recreational, is that something the council would like to see in the city of Livingston or has an appetite for as far as to allow? And you can discuss whether indoor or outdoor, but is commercial cultivation something, and I know, we're bringing it back because the council has spoken before about cannabis and hasn't been favorable, but the idea was always bring it back and discuss. And that's exactly what the chief and working with Tim, the idea of this workshop is.
I think what we need, and like the citizen said, this is coming. We do need to, the 5 of us need to get together, give a general direction, at least bring it back. Let's not wait till January. Let's just put something in before that. Let's just be ahead of the, now, there's so many variables that I don't know if and it's complicated. It looks easy, but it's complicated. I think, I don't know, maybe bringing something that sooner than later is to give more of a general direction to the staff right now, so they can come back and, like, for example, we can say, yes, we are interested in a dispensary or something. At least they can work on those things and bring it up. And that way, because it's going to take more than one meeting to get everything ironed out, I believe, And I'm sure that with 5 of us, there's going to be 5 different opinions or 5 variables, and that's okay. No, nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the 5 of us need to come together and work things out and give kind of a direction, so staff has a clear direction what to bring back up to us, so we can go ahead and get this moved forward.
What do you want?
No, I'm just saying that we got this today, and I don't know, maybe we can pick a date here, maybe sometime in October, if that's what we want to do. Bring it and give some sort of maybe a sample ordinance from another nearby city or something. We can kind of look and say, this fits Livingston, this does not, and we can kind of cut out, cross, or add things to it, and then that kind of gets them going to bring things to us, So I'd like to do it sometime next month, at least get a base for it, for the staff to work on.
And if I could interrupt, Mayor, and I apologize, and the council probably has comments. I think, Mayor Pro Tem, what you're saying is possibly right now is not the right time to have this discussion, and that's fine if the council goes that way. I can tell you that staff, we're still working on an ordinance because we do want to get something in place by the end of the year, just to clarify what you already have, but again, I think it's important not that there's ambiguity, but just to use the new terminology. It's fine if you want a workshop. I think we're still working on that ordinance for you. What we were asking is, as we work on that ordinance, just quickly, if the council was ready tonight, to at least discuss in general, okay, manufacturing looks good, or no, it doesn't. No, we've said no dispensaries in the past. We're going to keep no dispensaries. So some general comments like that, or some general direction. But if the council wants to digest this a little more, given that we just had a great presentation and look at the material and pick a date, that's fine, but I would, unless I receive other direction, we're still working on that ordinance that I just talked about.
Yeah, I would like us to see, for us to give staff direction tonight, We can vote on it later, but it's, I think we're behind the ball on this. You know, a lot of other cities have done this. Jobs are going to be going to Merced when they start doing cultivation, manufacturing, dispensaries. Jobs are going to be going to Ceres. Jobs are going to be going to Riverbank. They're going to be going to lots of cities all around us. Now, I understand if we don't want to do dispensaries, but if, I don't want us limiting business within our city. I would like to see an ordinance that uses our industrial zone and shows us what we can, shows a potential ordinance that we could pass and have our first reading that would permit manufacturing, cultivation, distribution in our industrial zone. And I'm still on the fence personally on dispensaries, but I think that areas where, if you go to a lot of these neighboring areas, today I spent a day in Riverbank in preparation for this meeting. If you go see these industrial buildings, you can't tell what kind of business is inside. It's not having that huge impact. I think a dispensary may have a larger impact than, say, industrial buildings. But I'd like to actually see an ordinance come forward that shows, one, that we could pass for manufacturing, for cultivation, and for distribution. And it's, I'm not, we all have our own opinions. I'm not opposed to us saying no to it or yes or no, and how the vote goes is how the vote goes, and I'll respect it. But I don't want us to keep on pushing this down the road. I'd like to see an ordinance written and then us vote yes or no.
Well, let's set up a workshop or meeting. My stance is, no on everything. That's just, our law enforcement and, working with kids. So, it's just my opinion. I don't, I'm not knocking anybody if they need it medically, but I don't want it in our city. So my suggestion is, let's have a workshop and let's give some direction. And, I'm going to make it put it out there and make it as tough as possible for somebody to come in and bring cannabis to our city. So that's
and one of the things is, I know we can't prohibit anything for personal use for 6 plants or under, or over actually, I should say. We can go up to 6 plants and we can't do it now. I am having somewhat second thoughts on saying that indoor only because, I can understand there's some outdoor nuisance or something, but if we allow maybe, I don't know if you can allow a mixture of indoor and outdoor or something, because, I'm just talking because I'm looking at it from the safety aspect of it. I'm not saying that let's do that. I'm just kind of things that I'm kind of running through my mind right now. Yes, we're saying indoor 6 plants, okay. And then, but what is the risk of, say that, and I don't know, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not, say that someone's growing 6 plants inside, those plants can get pretty big. What is the effect of that on their kids? Are we better off putting it outside where there's more fresh air? I don't know. I'm just kind of looking through that as well, I'm not talking about banning it. No, don't get me wrong. No, please. We're going to comply with all the rules. What I'm saying is it safer for us to allow outdoor for personal use where, so, I'm just, no, hear me out, okay? I'm not saying, because say that somebody wants to use it indoor and go indoor, but then they have children. We still can't prohibit them really, but are we, by allowing it growing inside only, are we putting those kids at risk? Because those plants, I think we've all known somebody that's been growing it outside. You can smell it block away. What's it like inside? What's the effect on the kids? So I don't know, that's some of the things that I would, I'd like to munch through.
Right now, it's a lot easier for me to rob you if it's in your backyard. But
Yeah, no, and I get what you're saying. Okay, say that and we're not going to do it. I'm just saying, say that I had it outside. Somebody robs my plant, takes it away. Is it better to have lost the plant or to risk children in the house, you know, you see what I'm saying? I'm looking at the aspects of how it affects the children. No, I'm not saying I'm correct, I'm just saying this is my thought.
Question for Jose, you know, with this, even though we can't ban indoor, could we make it a requirement that it be a detachable structure? Or is it, we have to allow any type of indoor that they want?
My understanding is that the law right now gives you options of what indoor means, and it's up to the person to decide, you know, where. It's just supposed to be indoors and fit that definition. So I can look at that, though. I could look at whether the league has further analyzed that or, you know, further analyze that. But right now, it was kind of left where it's indoors, and then there's a definition of what indoor means. Now, you could regulate it, put reasonable regulations in there, and that's where you're going.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going is it better to say it has to be detached from the main, you know? So that's kind of questions I like to answer with this as we're moving along with this. Because I kind of personally would rather allow it outside and have somebody steal it than to risk help to kids unless it's in a detached building.
I could comment on that, and I see your point, Vice Mayor, but I don't want someone growing 6 plants along my fence line. Now that affects my family and my kids also, so that there's a con to that also. I don't want to be out barbecuing and, you know, there's 6 feet
And Mr.
on
Mayor,
that fence line.
with all due respect, I do understand, and I have the similar concerns. It's bad enough that we, you know, you can smell that thing like from a block away, if not more. You can't do that. The wind's in the right direction, you know, you hope you don't get pulled over by the police because you didn't do it, it's just from the neighbors smelling. You know, but this is kind of things that, you know, I think we need to have, I'm just talking about having, the type of things I like to have a discussion with and you know, work with the police department, the fire department, everybody kind of give us some ideas. So, you know, we want to do this, we want to do it right. That's all I'm asking.
I would like to hear more from, you know, having further discussion with police department and fire department. What's the impact, like the general is saying, how, you know, they feel comfortable with the commercial dispensaries. So I would like to hear more regarding that, you know, regarding our two departments.
Because this is why, and I think, you know, and we don't have to wait till next month. We can do it, you know, as soon as possible. You know, get staff time, you know, fire department, the police department, everybody a chance to prepare things. So when they come in, they can answer these questions. And if we have a safety question or, you know, there's many questions we're not going to have answered for tonight, but I'd definitely like to move this sooner than later.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember.
My concern, and I'm supportive of this group, this body, no matter what we vote on. But right now is the time to try to recruit solid companies to come to our community. So there's companies out there, say in Salinas, who have been recognized by by Forbes magazine, et cetera. Right now is the opportunity for us to get the best of the best to come work in Livingston. Potentially get some of the tech companies to come out here for the testing side. I think if we continue to wait or push it down too far, then we're just going to get what's left. Last week, over 50 municipalities put medical cannabis on their discussion topics. All of a sudden now, cities across the state are changing their tune. They know that all their neighbors are doing it, so maybe it's time for them to take a look. And right now, I think it's going to be the only time we have the opportunity to get those legally binding pledges or development agreements where we could get money to pay for soccer fields or pay for something else. I don't think that's going to be there for us if we wait until February or March of next year. By that time, too many other municipalities will have opened it up, and now it's a race to the bottom to see who has the lowest taxes and who's going to be the most lenient on us. So if we wanted an opportunity to better our community on a pure fiscal level, that's all I'm talking about right now, is a pure fiscal level, we need to act fast. If we just wait for another 6 months, well, then we're just like everyone else, and we probably shouldn't put any taxes in place or expect much from a development agreement, because at that point, we've missed the boat. And I'm happy either way we go. I would just encourage us to vote yes or no as soon as we can.
You know, and Mr. Bouquet, through the mayor, of course, I would like to have something in place and adopted by the end of the year. I'd like to make sure that we get it done. But I'm not just saying that. I like to give staff some time to prepare for some of these things. And I'm not talking doing this in a regular council meeting. I'm saying just set up a special meeting workshop type thing where, you know, right now, I don't think fire department's prepared to answer a lot of the questions, and I don't think the police department may be, but, you know, and if you want to have somebody from the medical side of it and say, what are the effectives of indoor, I mean, I'm not saying there is anything, you know, I just like to have those answers, so when we make the decision, we make a wise decision. I agree with you, we don't want to be to the race to the bottom, but we also want to make sure that we do things the right way. Yes, money is important, but it's not the only thing. But let's just do it, get it done by the end of the year, but let's do it right, so we don't have to come back to it.
I agree about doing it before the end of the year and doing it in the workshop type of meeting as well.
Yeah, I don't have a problem of setting a workshop date tonight, you know, and then we give city manager, legal, police department, fire department, anybody else that wants to participate in the workshop, and even the citizens, that way they're aware of it, they can come up and say, here's our 2 cents worth, or here's our quarter ounce worth, whatever it is we want to put in, okay? At least here's our input.
Hey, you guys all absolutely correct, and I know the city manager and the city attorney are working behind the scenes trying to coordinate some workshops, because I think it's very important that we do some outreach, get some input from the community. So here's my idea. I know we need to build a fire department, so if we take the existing fire department, turn it into a dispensary, which is right in the PD, we tax it, we could build a new fire department.
Now we're being creative.
Actually, I guess you guys are like that, right?
That's a joke, but that's real.
So, in reality, I mean, we've thought about this quite a bit, and from our perspective, I think it's all about public safety. You know, the regulations here, it's here, we've got to monitor and regulate indoor cultivation for 6 plants, and that's here. The biggest thing I prefer is to try to make sure that we probably ban edibles. We do what we can to enforce, as Tim said, if we get some complaints on people smoking, you see smoke coming out, you see those type of issues, that we have the ability to investigate those and try to resolve it, because the community is going to be complaining, upset. We want to make sure we reduce that. We want to make sure the community is happy with what we put into place. But I'm not against, you know, looking at some options for manufacturing. Again, it's something that if there's a building and you can't see it and it's safe, or other businesses like that. The one thing I prefer not to have a dispensary here in town. I think it does bring a certain amount of element, and there's people with cash and those type of things. But I'm all for what council's direction is, and gets input from the community and whatever's best for our community. I mean, it's not, you know, we can't have a cookie cutter ordinance, because all cities are going to have different needs and different, you know, diversity in their communities, and whatever's best for us. But
Yeah, and we need to do what is good for Livingston as a whole. Now, my next question is, I'm okay with setting a date tonight, but how do we reach out to the people so that the people can come in and give us their viewpoint and their opinion? So, because we want this to be, you know...
Put it on the screen.
Well, yeah, but I mean, water bills will go out, but do we really want to, I mean, I don't know how much time it takes, because how long would it take for staff, once it gives it... Huh?
Facebook.
Facebook. Well, maybe we can have...
Actually, big banner on, hey, they do it for the festival.
You know what? Hey, you know what? Hey,
Right underneath the sweet potato.
that's actually not really a bad idea, really. No. What I'm saying is, if we set a date,
Right.
we have a Sweet Potato Festival coming up, that's the people can say there's a workshop coming up.
That's a good idea.
I'm talking about that. And even if we put some sort of a little thing outside that says, workshop coming up, and people can, when they're driving by, that's okay, that's fine with me. If we get one person, that's fine. If we get 100 people, that's even better, you know, but...
I'm looking at October, Monday the 16th and Monday the 23rd. You had something else, Council?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Before we start looking at dates, what I will tell you is getting something in place by the end of the year. The reason why we've been working on just the regulations to bring to you is most likely there will need to be changes to your zoning code. Now, just a reminder, the zoning code does require planning commission approval, and it's a noticed hearing. And then after the planning commission, not approval, I'm sorry, planning commission recommendation, after they give the recommendation, then it comes to council. The thought process was if we needed to change the zoning code for anything, cleanup or whatever, that would be going to the planning commission next month. And then, and again, we've been working on the clarifying what you currently have, not meaning you can't change your codes and continue working with your codes, but just timing is starting to be an issue to have something in place, because an ordinance does take 30 days to be in effect after you actually adopt it. So the 2 readings would be in November, and then you would have December as your 30 days. That doesn't mean you can't continue to work on it.
No, we can, and when we do have the workshop, let's just make sure that the planning commission is also there. Make it, give it, says, we're gonna have it, you're gonna be here, at least they don't see it for the first time when it goes to them. At least they're aware of it, they can ask questions. It's just a workshop, so I think let's get them in, even if let's shoot for as soon as possible. However, we have to comply with, I understand readings, seconds and all that, we understand. But sooner we get started, the sooner we can go ahead and conclude and get it over with,
So let's continue working on the reasonable regulations for the 6 plants, make sure we have a ban in place, and we just keep talking about it. I see where you're coming from, financially, but, where Denny's would bring in money, so would IKEA, all these other businesses would also bring it in, so I'd rather eat at Denny's than go, eat an edible.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Chief real quick. Chief, when I was at the League of California Cities, they were promoting an interesting idea, which was cannabis vending machines that would be stationed within the police department itself. What are your thoughts on that, having a vending machine within the police department? It sounds absurd, but I'm serious. Criminals aren't going to be trying to rob the police department, most likely.
That's a good one. I don't know, you stumped me. I don't know how to respond to that. And that's why I was joking earlier about the police barn, because it should be a safer place.
There's a booth right there at the League, and they were promoting the concept of safe cannabis by making it something where you have to go into a police station, and they confirm your age, and then you can go over and use the vending machine.
I think it's something to explore. If it's worked out right, and then it's something that...
Well, I don't think it's worked at all, but, it's something that might happen in the future.
Well, it is legal, so...
Let's pick a date.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's pick a date. How many workshops are we thinking? 1, 2, or?
The week of the 20th and that, I'm going to be for the LAFCO, so I'm not going to be here. I'd like to do it before that.
About the 16th.
Perfect. If everybody else agrees to it, I'm okay. If you can do it earlier, that's okay too, whatever.
And after the workshop, then we proceed on the discussion and working forward and moving to having staff move forward with some kind of ordinance?
Why can't we throw it to the planning commission first and see what they recommend to us? If we have to do that anyway.
Just do a joint.
Okay.
I was saying to bring him in with that at a joint.
All right.
Okay, I'm for that.
You know what? I'm just gonna,
You're the smoker on the group right there. We found him.
well, in quoting our famous president, I tried it, but I didn't hear him.
Well, I want to make a motion to continue with the regulations and, what the city council attorney mentioned, and continue talking about it and setting a date.
Have we set the date? Are we agreed on a particular date already?
I'm okay with the 16th.
Go ahead and second it.
I think part of that's going to be depending on the availability of some of the folks that are going to be involved in that. Jose's been working with that, so.
It's about a month out, pretty much, so I think we can clear our schedules.
So just call a friend. I'm looking at the calendar. But bottom line, I'll make whatever date you guys are available. I'll make it happen.
Bring your joints.
So one, I want to get direction, I want to get a clarification on direction, but just please know that the reason why, and talking to the city manager and talking with the chief, we wanted to come here and talking to staff and fire, is we wanted to at least get some direction from council so we could go focus. We didn't think it was going to be a yes/no checklist, but a, hey, we may consider that, which we would be then ready to present more information. I think what you're doing is perfectly fine, and, you know, we could just have a workshop on all the uses, that way you could we'll have the expertise here to answer all your questions. So that works and gives you more information.
Yeah, and also, a copy of the nearby ordinances that they already done, kind of gives us a thought process to send it to all the council and the planning commissioner.
Absolutely, and just, if I could ask just some clarification on direction.
Are we going to encourage our law enforcement and fire to bring in some kind of safety, what do we have to do with safety as well? For the workshop, or we're just looking at?
They'll be here.
They'll be here for
Yeah, I'll be here.
questions.
We'll just talk, I mean, we can discuss if something comes up and we have some concerns in certain areas, we can express those. And I'm sure Chief will probably have some input as well. So, no, I think it's important that you hear from all angles, you know, full disclosure on our thoughts and our, you know, how it's going to impact public safety.
And we'll be ready, council, to cover all of the uses. Again, we have experts on the entire uses and can provide more information on potential regulation for everything. The direction, though, Mary, was a direction that we continue right now, even independently from the workshop, to continue working on at least the regulations for the 6 plants, the indoor 6 plants that we can't prohibit. But at least bringing back to council at least a sample or a draft, you know, continue fast-tracking that, because that seems to be a kind of a safety issue, a health issue.
Let's work on that, and then also making sure our ban is in place, so we don't...
I completely understood, given that the regulations are going to take longer than the end of the year, just full disclosure, with the workshops and putting it on a planning commission with the public hearing notices, most likely setting a first workshop October 16th, and depending if you want more workshops, you're, just calendar-wise, it's past the year. So I get the direction then to continue working to make sure that what you currently have in place right now, not changing what you have in place, but just updating it for the lingo and the whole deal, which currently you have a ban.
If we want sooner.
We could even go up to, around the corner.
That's probably too close.
Yeah, October 9th, but I think that's a holiday, Columbus Day. Well, the only thing is, can we do it on our meeting October 3rd, that way the planning gets it October 10th, because the planning commission meeting's on too soon?
No time for the noticing. It needs to be a public hearing notice, but we change our zoning code.
Okay. But we're not planning to change our planning code October 30th. It's just a workshop, right?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, you're talking about the workshop.
Yes.
Yeah, no, all the noticing and all the planning commission and all that happens after the council decides where you want to go, and we show you some draft regulations if you want to go that route.
I have a motion, anyone? Second?
Okay. What's the motion?
Continue working on.
The regulations for the 6 plants, make sure we have our ban in place, and also go into a workshop the 16th, including the community, law enforcement, fire, public safety, and planning commission.
Okay, debate. Jose, if you're saying that we're not going to be able to meet our objective and have something in place by January 1, then that directly goes in disagreement with what 3 of us councilmen have said. So I'd like us to figure out a way or a plan now so we can have our workshops in place, so we could be making a decision prior to that.
Well, I think there's still a motion on the floor. The motion could be struck down. There hasn't been an official motion yet. We have a motion And then the motion is again, it's.
Yeah, wait for the second.
Continue working on the six plants regulations.
Aguilar seconded it, correct?
Did you just second it?
I will second it just for the purpose of the vote.
We could just died.
We have a second.
Councilmember McCabe?
But point of order, I still have right to debate after there's a second, sir. And so I want to reiterate again, is that we have a motion and a second. I have the right to debate after there is a motion and a second. That's how parliamentary procedure works.
Can we amend it to make it a workshop on the 3rd?
And that's, I mean, if we want to go ahead and just, I mean, if we want to go through the procedures of amending it, you could also just, you could work on the timing. I think that the motion didn't have any timing as far as when you want your workshop. All the motion is continue working on the six plants regulation, continue working to make sure that what we have in place is what we have in place, so the ban is real, and then you could discuss timing regarding the workshops. If you get workshops earlier, we'll definitely do our best in putting a notice in the paper, getting an ordinance to you at the workshop that you could look at. We could have different structures of, I have an ordinance, and again, not everything's cookie cutter like the chief said. I have an ordinance here that we've prepared for other jurisdictions for you to look at whether, okay, well, we don't want all of that, but we want this, we want manufacturing. What does that look like? We could show you that at the workshop to see what you would like. But I think that the interest was just following, I think, Mayor, what Tim said, just making sure that if you don't get to the end of the year, you at least have all your regs regarding at least the six plants and at least the ban that fits all the lingo and the whole deal. We currently have a ban right now, let me explain that, but we were working on, given the new language, we were working on the new terminology, making sure it's there. That way nobody could say it's ambiguous. I don't think it is now, but that way, just making sure.
That's what I was focusing on, if you want to do a different date, that's fine, but I was thinking, I don't want to rush it just because we want to get it to the 3rd. I want to make sure that we have all the information that we can, that's why I was giving it, to the 16th, but if you guys want to do the 3rd, then that's fine also.
Well, council's saying that if we go that process, we're not going to be able to complete it by the 1st. I want to figure out what we can do to potentially achieve that.
Legal has told us that no matter what, even if we hold it on the 3rd or the 16th, by the time we do zone ordinance change and all that, we're not going to do by the 1st anyway.
It's going to be tight, and that's all I'm saying. I think that the faster we go, the faster we make it to the planning commission. If we can make it to the planning commission in October, and then swing it around to the meetings in November for the city council, then, and even, let's say even it's not in place by January 1st, if at least your ordinance has gone through, and you're just waiting for the 30 days, that's also going to make a difference, and I think that will at least be beneficial, right? At least adopting it, even if it's not, worst case scenario, even if it's not in place, I think it would still be a good sign for all the manufacturers or all the business people that you're serious in doing it. Okay, I have no more debate.
Just vote for yes and be done with it.
Okay, welcome. All right, well, Councilmember McCabe?
Aye.
Councilmember Aguilar?
Yes.
Councilmember Sicairos?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra?
Yes.
Mayor Soria? Yes. Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
So is that workshop going to be on the 3rd or the 16th?
You guys are good on the 3rd? One of our planning commissioners.
Just one quick thing, Bob Wallace, 1697 Spruce. Can we have, I know the 3rd is going to be quick, how many citizens, the average citizens in Livingston even know what the current ordinance is that's already in place? How are we going to let them know what's in place versus what we've just learned tonight? How are we going to squeeze that in?
But that's
going to be on the 3rd, because that's going to,
That's something they can be brought up to speed on the 3rd, say, here's what
yeah,
our current...
they need to know what
Yeah.
currently we have
Yeah.
versus the latest update we have. I want to make sure that the average citizens are aware that that's going to be the discussion on the 3rd, or we're not going to have anybody here.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I want to thank everybody for allowing it. I just want to give staff time to prepare for our questions, and let's just do it. You know, if no use sacrificing 1 or 2 weeks of speed and then missing something. Let's just do it right the first time.
All right, we will move on to a resolution approving the Department of Forestry Fire Protection Agreement.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to recuse myself from this item. Although I have any financial gain, I'm a volunteer of the Livingston Fire Company, so I'll be recusing myself.
All right.
And just for the record, the council member does not have any financial interest. He's 100% a volunteer. We'll be working with the council member as bigger decisions come forward for the fire department to look at the Political Reform Act. The item came late in the agenda cycle, so that wasn't done, but I think that the recusal is more for perception issues than for any, there's no financial interest at all.
No, it's okay.
All right, at 7FG17XX for services from the date of the last signatory on page 6 of the agreement to June 30, 2018, under the Volunteer Fire Assistance Program of the Cooperative Forestry Assistance Act of 1978. And from there, we'll move on to item 3.
All right, Mr. Mayor, council members, in front of you, you have a resolution. It's a VFA grant program which provides funding to organize, trained, and equip fire departments in rural areas and communities to prevent and suppress fires. CAL FIRE is responsible for administering the grant funds, which are allocated by USDA. USDA has authorized CAL FIRE to make awards available on a matching basis to public entities such as cities, counties, special districts, and fire departments. So in essence, what this grant will do, it's a matching grant. It'll provide us the opportunity to purchase a structural and wildland PPE for the volunteers here within the city of Livingston. This will allow us to remove outdated and out-of-compliance PPE and ensure that our volunteers have a second set of wildland and structured PPE. We're looking at purchasing a total of 30 wildland pants and coats, 8 structured pants and coats, as well as 8 structural helmets, 12 PPE flash hoods, I'm sorry, 10 PPE flash hoods, and wildland goggles. The reason why it's critical for our volunteers to have a second set of turnouts and wildland gear is because when we respond to hazardous environments, whether it be structure fires, vehicle accidents, hazmats, their protective equipment becomes contaminated. And the time that it takes to decontaminate and clean their structure turnouts is approximately 1 day. So by the time that we go through the process of cleaning, it puts that volunteer out of service for that entire day, basically for 24 hours, and it minimizes the number of personnel that we have available for us to respond. And the second reason why it's critical is because of the cost to purchase new PPE. For just one structural setup, you're looking at roughly about $5,000 if you're looking at a helmet, coat, jacket, flash hood, goggles, boots. So that type of cost there impacts our budget. And so it put us in a position where we haven't been able to purchase over a number of years. What this grant will do is it's a 50-50 matching grant. So it's not to exceed $20,000. So anything that we purchase from the grant, which total we're looking at about $35,000, the grant will pay half of that, so roughly just over $17,000. So it's a huge saving to the city, and it's well needed for your fire department. Any questions?
Open it up to the public for any comments or questions. Okay, close it, bring it back to council.
We're not going to skip on safety and for our volunteers. They're not county volunteers, they're Livingston volunteers. And with that, I make the motion to adopt the resolution approving the Department of Forestry Fire Protection Agreement for services of the date and amount signatory on page 6 of the agreement to June 30th under the Volunteer Fire Assistance Program and Cooperative Forest Assistance Act of 1978 and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement on behalf of the city.
Second.
I have a first from Vice Mayor Sama and a second from Councilman McKay. Roll call, please.
Okay, roll call. Councilmember McCabe?
Aye.
Councilmember Sicairos?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sama?
Yes.
Mayor Soria?
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote of 4-0 to 1.
We'll wait for Councilmember Aguilar to come back, and we'll move on to item 3. Okay, Councilman Aguilar has returned. Move on for item 3, resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with WC3, West Coast Consultants Incorporated for building department support services.
Yes, Mayor and Council, we parted ways with Fort Leaf. Fort Leaf's last day is going to be the second week in October, and staff went ahead and sent out an RFP. We received 3 proposals. We did a screening evaluation, and based on the input of staff, we are recommending that we enter into a building department services contract with WC3, and with the transition date being the second week in October, staffing levels will continue to be the same at this time.
All right, thank you. I'll open it up for public questions, comments.
Catherine Shaw Rodriguez, P.O. Box 163 again. I have a few questions. Question number 1 is, why did we part ways with Four Leaf? That's question number 1. Question number 2, in addition to this firm, what were the other 2 firms that submitted proposals? Question number 3, why weren't all 3 proposals included in the agenda packet so that we could look at them? And the question number 4 is, I was looking at Exhibit A, scope of services, and it's blank, and I was wondering why it was blank and didn't list the scope of services. And the last question, I guess that would be 5, would be Exhibit B, the compensation schedule is also referenced several times throughout the agreement, and Exhibit B is also blank. And I was wondering if we could have that information, or how soon we could have these blank pages filled in.
Sure. So if you go to, as it relates to Exhibit B, it's on page number 18, under the Statement of Qualifications for Professional Service Fees. Okay? As it relates to your item number 4 that you said, That was staff oversight in terms of not providing that scope of services for you, but it is also incorporated in the proposal. And if you go to page 9 through 13, that they should have referenced that in there.
Okay, could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. If you go to page 9 through 13,
Okay.
and your other question was, why wasn't the other three incorporated in here? There's certainly, we're open to provide you copies with that if you want. We didn't want to go ahead and include, it's a lot of copying and staff time and so forth, but it's certainly open to the public, and we have the actual copies in the office for your review if you would like. The three companies, one of them, it was CEI, and the other one was CSG. And your first question was, why did we part ways with Four Leaf? The reason why we parted ways with, or I recommended that we part ways with Four Leaf is we encountered some issues, quite a bit of issues as it relates to the building inspection side of the building department services. And given that, and I actually had an extensive conversation with Four Leaf manager, Joseph Nichols. And at that point, I personally made the decision that we needed to move on, and I informed our council, and at this point in time, that's the direction that we're going.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? I'll bring it back to council.
As far as cost, Jose, where did they come in at between the three companies?
In terms of cost, overall cost, actually, West Coast Consultants is actually the, I don't want to say cheapest, I'll just say that they're the lowest, yes, in all the categories. Yeah. And there's one, if you go to where it talks, page number 18, where it talks about complete building plan review, that 70% was negotiated down to 65%. Okay, so you can make that change on that, page number 18. And if you look at the permit tech, that's down to 55. What we were currently paying now was 65. And if you go through all the other hourly rates, WC3 was more competitive.
Terrific.
Did you say page 18?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm looking through this, and the document that I'm looking at had 14 pages.
There should be more than 18 pages.
I can share mine with you after, Catherine, if you want to reference it.
So that's it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, will you entertain a motion? Okay.
She got the information she needed.
Are you good, Catherine?
It's the proposal, not the agreement, so.
So, page 18.
Okay. Yeah. We're good.
I move we approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with WC3 West Coast Consultants Incorporated for building department support services.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call. Councilmember McCabe? Aye. Councilmember Aguilar?
Yes.
Councilmember Siqueiros?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Samra?
Yes.
Mayor Soria?
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, next meeting, can we have another mic over here, please? Can we get another mic for Councilmember, I know sometimes it's pretty...
Actually, thank you very much for bringing that up, Vice Mayor Sama. We had a meeting with IT department. IT department is actually working on specking out new microphones because there's actually several problems with these microphones. One, they're too short, you have to grab it and pull it towards you. And then if you get too close to it, then folks can't really hear it because there's a lot of muffling. And so they're going to, they spec them out, and then we're going to get brand-new microphones for everybody.
Yeah.
No, not wireless. Not wireless.
I know sometimes we don't want to hear them.
Yeah, so that's project number one. Yeah, project number one is that. Project number two is that we're actually looking into, they're not experts in the visual side of things, and so we're looking at talking to an expert so that we can also incorporate some of those big monitors in here and look at our budget. So we're doing that. That's project number two. Project number three, we're also looking at, there's a myth out there that, and this has been looked at over and over again, that we'll actually save money by using laptops or tablets and so forth, but it's more for other sakes, and so we're looking at that as well, so maybe we can get you, it's actually cheaper if we went with the tablet versus having a monitor here and incorporate it into the and putting a computer down here. So we're looking at all those things to make sure that we can, be environmentally friendly, but also be cost, because there's ongoing yearly costs, and then the life of, and you know this group well, the life of computers is basically 2.5 to 3 years, and then you got to replace it again, and you have to pay for permit. So those are the three projects ongoing, and I appreciate you guys working on that.
I thought he must mean somebody wrong, you took away his mic, you know?
Because he came in late.
That concludes our council meeting for September 19th. Thank you very much, everybody. Drive safely. God bless.
I give you mine.